Welcome to The Power of Rhythm, a podcast with your host Reinhard Flatischler, founder of MegaDrums, Taketina Symphonic, and a worldwide network of groundbreaking rhythm training. This podcast will offer you an incredible diversity of voices around the one thing that connects us all: rhythm.
Hi and welcome to episode 31 of my podcast. Today it's time to welcome a truly legendary drummer. He's a 4-time Grammy Award winner, and he's considered to be the founding father of the modern frame drum movement. He was a member of Steve Reich and musicians and the Paul Winter Consort, amongst many other groups, and he brought drumming in general and frame drumming specifically to a completely new dimension never heard before. His virtuoso playing with hand movements, finger techniques, along with his composition style, which incorporates stepping, drum language, and overtone singing, has opened new possibilities for musicians around the globe, resulting in a shift in modern percussion. He played in 2 tours of my MegaDrums group, where he joined the lineup with Zakir Hussain, Airto Moreira, KODO drummer Leonard Eto, and many others. Welcome, Glen Velez.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to see you after a long time.
Yes.
In the meantime, I turned a little bit towards the symphonic music, but I'm certainly contemplating of kind of reviving the MegaDrums idea.
Oh my God, that'd be great. Fantastic.
And I would love to start our journey today with a dialogue between Zakir Hussain and you playing the rig and him playing the tabla, just, to get us started,
Yes.
okay?
Okay.
Well, if this is not groove, I don't know what is. That was a great time. Now, are you currently in New York?
Well, I'm living in New Jersey now, so just outside of New York, about 40 miles outside of New York.
How is it there right now in all this crazy time at the moment?
Well, I think it's the same as most places around the world where the whole life has changed, no traveling, especially for musicians, of course, so very little no traveling for me. I haven't been on an airplane in a year. And so a lot more teaching, a lot more Zooming like this with group classes and classes of various kinds. And we moved to this new place because it's a little bit more isolated. We have various horse farms in this area. Nice. So it's very nice vibe.
So let's go back to where you started. Actually, you started with a drum set, right? At the Manhattan Music School?
Yes. Well, when I was a kid, I have an uncle who's a drummer. And so he was my first influence and my first teacher. He was the brother of my father. And he was the first one to show me how to play. And I was about 7 or 8. And then I just kept on going, took lessons in Texas, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And then I went to New York, and when I was going to Manhattan School of Music, I studied more classical percussion. So, the timpani and the vibraphone, xylophone, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And but about a few years after I got out of school, I discovered the frame drum. So that caused this quite dramatic shift in my attention and my focus and my energy, and that's the way it's been ever since.
Do you remember what was the moment where you discovered the frame drum? How did you discover it?
Yes, well, when I was playing with Steve Reich, and I was playing mostly marimba with him, and there were 2 other players in that group who were very involved back in the 70s in the study of Indian music. Mm-hmm. So Bob Becker and Russ Hardenberger. Bob studied the North Indian tabla, and Russ was studying South Indian mridangam. And so Russ's teacher was in New York one time, and I said, well, I'll take a lesson. And I wanted to study the mridangam, and I started out that way. One lesson, after a few months, he saw a tambourine on my wall, an orchestral tambourine. And he said, we play that in South India. I said, oh, really? I had no idea what you would do with it. So he picked it up and started to do the Kanjira style, South Indian tambourine playing. And of course, it's an amazing style. So I saw that, and I really immediately liked it. I said, let's study that. I really like that sound, that the size of the instrument, everything about it. So that's the way it started. And that was in 1977.
Wow. Quite some time
1977.
ago.
Yeah. And so we started to study that. And then I said, well, I know that they're into the tambourine in the Middle East. So being in New York, there was, a lot of concerts of all kinds. So I started to go to Middle Eastern concerts. And I saw a guy playing the rick, very nice style, beautiful style. And I just went up to him and said, can I study that with you? And that's how the whole thing started. I started to study the different styles, the Middle Eastern, the South Indian. Then there was the Italian, and there was the Central Asian. It went from there. So I just was finding out more and more about all these different ways of holding these drums and the techniques involved. And as an offshoot of that, for some reason, I got very interested in the history very early on. I thought, I know that they played, I always remembered seeing pictures of tambourine players in Renaissance paintings. Mm-hmm. So I started to look at those, go to the library and look at those. And so that interest also has continued all this time. So I have these thousands of depictions of frame drums from cultures all over the world and from all different time periods. So that's been an ongoing interest of mine. And I think that, for me, that really ties into my feeling inspired by seeing these ancient frame drummers and seeing how they're holding the drum. And it looks exactly like what I'm doing. So it feels a real connection, you know.
Yeah, you definitely have become an archetype because you have really created something new out of it. And in the first collaborations, you also played with Yusuf Sharonik and with Shane Shanahan, right?
Yes, yes.
And how did you meet them actually?
Well, they're students. In other words, what I started to do was, there was nobody doing frame drum, you know, back when I started. So I started to teach people to play frame drum, and every once in a while there'd be a really good student that would come along that could really, you know, pick it up fast. And so I started to create pieces for more than one person.
Okay.
Because initially I was just doing solos and stuff, and playing with other musicians, but just, you know, drum and trumpet or drum and other instruments. So I, you know, very early on, I think that also the frame drum lends itself to group playing, you know, more than one player. It really has a good quality about that. So I started to compose pieces that had more than one player playing. And when Yusuf started probably around in the early 90s, and Shane started in the late 90s. So I've been playing with these guys for over 20 years. And, you know, taught them my style. And of course, the other thing about frame drumming is that once people get involved with it, they really start to create their own version of it. You know, it happens very readily. So, you know, they also teach, and Shane plays with the Silk Road Ensemble with Yo-Yo Ma, and so he's very active, or he has been very active over the years, doing frame drumming in a lot of different situations. And Yusuf also plays with a lot of different groups.
Now, there's a composition called Koba that you brought out, and there are several tars on it. Then there's a tupan, which is like this big bass drum, and the rig. Now, I have a question about the tars. A tar and a bodhran looks kind of similar. One is from Ireland, one is from the Middle East. What's the difference? And
yeah, well, you have this. This is a typical tar drum, one type of tar drum. And basically the way this is played is like this. So you have one hand underneath, another up here, and then. Now these are found all over the Middle East, a lot of different versions, and even into India, and using an Arabic style of playing. Now the bowron is an Irish drum, and mostly it's played with a stick, mostly traditional Irish playing. But the reason
you don't play it with a stick, right?
No, I can, but that's not really what I'm a specialist in. Basically, I saw, back in my early days with research, I had been studying for a couple of years, and I saw a Nubian frame drummer that was in a book, just a picture from the 70s. And he was playing the drum like this, and I had never seen that before. So I said, hey, I'll try that, you know. And then and basically I just said, well, I can use all these techniques from Arabic and South Indian, etc., but I can do it in this style. And because the bowron is a larger frame drum, that was the one I started doing, that style. But you can do it on any frame drum. But basically, the bowron is the Irish word for a large frame drum.
Right. So that basically that combination of so many styles made also this unique way of you playing, and then you're playing, of course, in the overtone singing. And so maybe you should listen to this first sound, a song of Koba. Is it the right way I say it? Koba?
Yes, Koba.
Okay, Koba. So let's listen to it. So Koba, composed by Glen Velez and the other musicians, Yusuf Sharonik and Shane Shanahan. The voice was with you from the very beginning, right? In your compositions.
Yeah, and really I picked that up, first of all, from the Arabic a little bit. They certainly used the doom and the talk, and they sang the rhythms, doom, taka doom, taka doom, ba ba, etc., in a specific way to represent the sounds of the drum. But then when I started to study the South Indian, it was even more extensive. Of course, the drum language that's used in South India is just very inspirational because it is so extensive. It's like, just they're covering anything they can figure out and rhythmically play, sing it, have a vocalization that allows for the singing of it. And of course they have that in North India too. But the thing that differs in the South Indian style is that it's an ensemble-oriented style. So, there's usually 2 or 3 drummers playing together. So that's one of the reasons I think that the unisons are so beautiful, the South Indian drummers, because they're, going inside their head with the same vocalization. So they have a drum language that's very specific. So that really has been a big influence once I realized that I could use that in the compositions and also in the teaching style that I've developed. Then that has sustained me all these years. I keep discovering new aspects of that.
But here you really use it as kind of a creative element, just playing a pulse with ta, ta, ta. It's very beautiful. And, this Indian drum language, of course, brings us already to your beautiful wife, Laurie. Mm-hmm. Did she study this before she met you, or?
No, she had, her background was as a jazz singer.
I know.
And she went to Berkeley and studied jazz singing, but she was always very interested in rhythm. As a jazz singer, you are. And when I first met her, I was giving a class at one of the universities in New York, and she was in the music therapy department in this new school. And so I was doing my thing with group drumming and the vocalizations for the music therapists. And the woman who directed that program said, "Well, you should meet Laurie because she's a vocalist and she's very interested in rhythm, and what you're doing seems like good connect." So we started to connect. She gave me a cassette of one of her recordings, and I immediately heard how she was so attuned to rhythm and so energized by the rhythmic aspect of her jazz singing. So I said, I bet you could get into this style of things that I'm doing, which is very rhythmic, and also this drum language. And she had heard tabla, and heard the tabla drum language, but she hadn't been exposed to the South Indian style. And so we just started to do it, started to do it together. And I showed her more and more about it. And then I started to incorporate that more and more into the compositions because she became very fluent at it. Then she started to study with Subhash Chandran, he passed away within the last year, I think. But he was a great exponent of the Konakol, the South Indian style. And so she studied with him for a while. And he really gave her a lot of new material, a lot of things to work on. And so when we do compositions, that's a key element because she is so fluent in it. It's really nice to incorporate that into the composition style.
I have never heard someone so eloquent in this. It blows my complete mind. I listened to quite a lot of your recordings in various videos yesterday in the preparation of this. It's unbelievable. How can you get that fast and that precise?
Yeah, she's really good. And one of the things that we realized is that the South Indian drum, the mridangam, for instance, is kind of a low-end drum.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of lower in pitch. So it contrasts somewhat with the tabla in that sense. And the tabla has these high ringing overtones, and the both the Kenjira and the Mridangam have a lot of low end. So when the South Indian singers interpret their konakol, they're kind of imitating the sound of the Mridangam and the Kenjira. So it's a little bit more guttural. Whereas with Laurie, we've been doing a lot of Rick.
Okay.
And the sound of Rick is so high and so articulate. You heard it in the duet with Zakir. And so she imitates that sound. And that sound is so much more tight, you know, and articulation oriented. So that's really where she got the unique way that she articulates the konakol.
I think in the next track, which is called Pythia, do I pronounce this right? Pythia?
Pythia, yeah.
Can you say what the name means, or?
Pythia is it's a Greek word, and it's one of the ways that the oracles translate their material into language.
So she's already in there, right? So let's listen to that, okay? Pythia with Glen Velez, Rick Kotler. We have a tar, botran, clappers, and really very mesmerizing triangles. They are kind of like a completely different layer in this whole thing. And that reminds me on one of our first rehearsals where we had this multi-layered rhythm, and you put a rattle into your sandals, you know, you play all these polyrhythms. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
When did you actually meet Laurie? What year was that?
That was 2002. So it was right after the 2001 events.
Yeah.
Or 2011, I'm sorry. Let's see, when did that happen? 9/11 was 2001, yeah.
One, yeah.
So, yeah, 2001. So we met right after that. And we just started collaborating within about 6 months.
Wow. And what is your most recent project together?
Well, we put out a duo CD, and that was about 2 years ago. That was the last CD. That was in 2019. And that is just duos, and it's material that we've been playing for a number of years in a duo format. Some of the pieces were actually composed for a larger ensemble, but we will do them in a duo context, kind of rearrange them. And I think one of the pieces that I sent you was the Miriam's Prophecy, which really has a lot of her KODO in it.
And before we go to that, there is something called the Hitti Prana. What does that mean?
Okay, the Hittites. The Hittites were an ancient people in ancient Anatolia. And it's actually there's a famous Bible story of Bathsheba. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Bathsheba, but she was a woman who was married to a man who was, she was desired by King David, the famous King David from the Bible. And he wanted her, but he knew that she was married to this lieutenant in his army. So he said, well, I'll send him to war, and probably he'll be killed. And then I can have Bathsheba. And that's what happened. He sent him to war, and apparently that was not looked upon well by the higher powers.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's the story. And this man who was killed was a Hittite.
So there's a lot of ancient knowledge and wisdom, and where you have the sources of your frame drums, as you have already said, right?
Yeah, I get a lot of not only inspiration of just looking at a picture of someone from Greek times playing a frame drum on a vase, or Egypt. All these ancient cultures had the frame drums. Not only that, but also the idea that the ancient stories, ancient literature that have frame drum in them. Miriam from the Bible also played the frame drum. So there's also stories from the ancient world about frame drums. So those are also inspiring, and I use a lot of those in my way of thinking about compositions and titles for pieces.
And most of your compositions are multi-layered in one or the other way. Kind of sometimes polyrhythmic, sometimes differently. Was this from the very beginning? Well, you started with strap drum. This, at this time probably was not yet there, but when did it come in that you went into this multi-layered composition?
Well, as soon as I said, when I started, I was just playing solos. But as soon as I started to teach, I started to hear what the sound of two frame drums was like. And then when there's more students, I'd have groups, and then it just became apparent. When you get a lot of frame drums together, there's a lot of melodies that start to emerge from the interactions between the drums. And then I just translate that onto other instruments, triangle or whatever instruments whatever colors I want to involve.
Mm-hmm. So, Hitti Prana. That is Hittiti Prana on the drums, Paul Dranta, Enriquez Glen Velez, and the voice, Laurie Cutler. It's amazing. This is kind of, you see the jazz influence, then you hear all this incredible rhythmic voice in it, but it also has a connotation of Middle Eastern singing. Right? It's something very new. I've never heard this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Has you ever get in contact like with Middle Eastern singing, or?
Just, when we've traveled around over the last 20 years and done festivals and stuff, she'll be exposed to, all kinds of singing. So she definitely, because she's Jewish, she has this, also the tradition of nigun, which is a Middle Eastern style of chant from the Jewish tradition. So she has that element of Arabic, Middle Eastern background also.
It's such a creative brew, and still, like, for example, some people say, okay, the tradition of a drum has to be, given to the next generation and so on. But what you really did, you revived, in my opinion, the many frame drums and brought it to a completely new level where now it's, for many people, something that's so common. You really brought, even in Europe here, frame drum to the common knowledge. People say, Glen Velez is a frame drum, Like 10 years, 20 years ago, this was not the case at all.
No, when I started, it was really an exotic instrument. It's like, what do you do with that? And the other thing that also has given me a lot of joy, a lot of wonderful feedback, is the quality of the tambourine that is stigmatized in Western culture. Is that you say tambourine and most people say, oh, you go like this, you shake the thing, And then when they see what's possible on the tambourine, the Kanjira, the South Italian, all the different styles, it's mind-blowing for people because they see that this very simple instrument is capable of big expression. So, that's always a big eye-opener and a lot of fun as the person giving, to see how much surprise there is when they see what's possible.
Yeah, you've been teaching like thousands of students over the world. Are there some names that I will recognize that you have been teaching or initiating into drumming, as frame drumming?
Well, yeah, there's let me see, Andrea Piccioni, he's a well-known Italian frame drummer. Zohar Fresco is a fantastic Israeli frame drummer, and he came to New York at an early stage of his involvement with frame drums, and checked out what I was doing, and we took some lessons and stuff. But each of these guys have really developed their own whole pathway, because as I said, when you get into it, you just carve a new road, each player really. And that's the beauty and the power of this drum, is that, you can see that there's this basic vocabulary of dooms, talks, and pause, and whatever. But then there's an endless way of negotiating how you play that. So, yeah, there's so many players now that are creating and, doing their own thing with it and figuring out ways to incorporate it into lots of different styles of music also.
You have been kind of associated also with Remo?
Mm-hmm. When I was, let's see, in 1983, I'd been playing the frame drums by that point about 5 or 6 years, and already had developed a style where I combined a lot of stuff. And there was a big percussion convention called PAS every year in the United States, Percussive Art Society convention, where there's thousands of drummers come together and teachers and manufacturers all come together in a big convention. And Remo came to my workshop that I did in Dallas, where it was held that year in 1983. And Remo Belli.
Yeah, Remo Belli, right.
Yeah, and he came and he saw what I was doing, and he said, you know, we could make that kind of drum very easily. You know, they were making, you know, drum heads. And so he just saw, hey, we just put a drum head on a frame and we got a frame drum. So he said we could make that drum using synthetics, you know, because at that time I didn't have any synthetic headed drums. Everything was skin drums, and I had heating pads and heat lamps and all kinds of craziness to keep the drums in a playable condition. So he saw that and said we could make different versions. And so I said, wow, that's great, let's do it. And so I went out to California in his factory, and we started to, you know, develop the ideas about different kinds of, and I still have a lot of the prototypes that we made back in the mid-'80s of the very first versions of the frame drums. And he was, you know, a big proponent of music as a healing modality, music that drumming as a healing modality, and drumming as a way to for communities to come together, you know. So he was really into that. And so he saw the frame drum as really fit into that category of drum that could be available to more people, and you know, not such a scary instrument like a drum set or a timpani or whatever, you know, something you could hold.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine too, and I visited him many times in his, you know, factory there. He was a very, very remarkable man who did a lot for the community and for drum building in general.
Yes.
So with the next track called Miriam's Prophecy, we hear Laurie even more in the foreground. Okay, let's listen and talk.
Dit tong kita taka tari kita taka doom ta doom. Digu tari kita taka doom ta doom. Dit tong kita taka tari kita taka doom ta. Digu tari kita taka doom ta. Dit tong kita taka tari kita taka tari kita taka ta. Ta dikita kita. Ta dikita kita. Tari kita taka.
Dit tong kita taka doom ta doom. Digu tari kita doom ta doom. Ta dit tong kita doom ta. Digu tari kita doom ta. Dit tong kita ta. Ta dikita kita. Ta dikita kita. No way adum. Web no way adum. Badum badem. Badum badum. Me badum me badeo. Hey, another badum badum. Nia badum dea da deo, nia da dea do do da dea, nia ba dea do do ba do da dea do da dea, da da dea da da dea do da dea do da dea, da da dea da da dea do da dea do da dea, da da dea da da tum to dea do, web tum dea do, badum badee. Doom ta 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 doom ta 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 ta
Miriam's Prophecy, composed by Glen Velez. Glen here on this high, sharp sound of the Rick and Laurie with the voice, with the wonderful rhythmic voice. How did you come up with the blueprint of this Miriam's Prophecy? Like how to start when you...
The pieces often start with the rhythmic contour. So this was there's a 10-beat rhythm in Arabic music called Samai, 3-2-2-3 rhythm. And this is, the beginning is kind of a takeoff on that rhythm, but with a little bit of twist to it. And then one of the things that also happens with frame drum, because it's such a melodic drum and it has so many overtones when you're playing it, that often you play a rhythm over and over again and you start to hear melody. And that's where the melodies come from. And originally this was created for instrumentalist. So there was various flute players that had played this piece, various other instruments. So the thing about Laurie's skill is that she's able to sing instrumental music very well. So because she's got a very clear vocabulary of scat, and so she can kind of negotiate her way through material that is not really written for voice. It's written for instruments, but she can articulate it nicely. So that's where the structure came from, and then the different sections a couple of the sections are about different ways of subdividing 5, because the 10 is the initial one, and then 5 comes in, and then there's one section in 3. So a lot of times it comes from one contour, and then I'm taking it apart and looking for ways to play with it.
Yeah, this additive rhythms and overlays that are both our favorite things to play around with. And, the bridge that Laurie can kind of span from just pure jazz singing to this very, very amazing conical. I saw yesterday a video of her where she's just doing conical. It's like, how can you do this with your tongue so long, without getting exhausted? It's amazing.
Yeah, she's great.
So did you ever have a contact together with our friends of MegaDrums, like Leonard Eto or Airto? Or?
Well, I saw Leonard at a festival in Hawaii a number of years ago. It must have been 15 years. It was a while ago. And Zakir, I've seen a couple of different times in different situations. Airto, I saw once since then. So a couple of times I've come in contact with those guys, yeah.
So I'm curious, maybe I can kind of inspire you to join another MegaDrums if I can revive it once everything opens up again.
Of course, yes. I mean, it was great fun. And obviously, when you bring together such fantastic talents as those guys, and the people that you invite, it's a big learning experience, and you really pick up a lot of wonderful ideas and attitudes that are a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Now let's dive into one more memory of that time, if you may.
Yes, of course.
That was MegaDrums with Glen Velez, Zakir Hussain, Melton Cardona, Airto Moreira, Valerie Naranjo, Wolfgang Puschnik, and I also was in this band, so it was great times. Have you heard about Valerie Naranjo? She's in New York, I guess.
Oh yeah, I've seen Valerie many times because she's in New York, and I've seen her at percussion conventions over the years. So yeah, I've been in touch with her.
So if you see her again, please convey my love
I'll
to
give
her.
her your regards for sure. Yeah.
So Glenn, I thank you so much for your time. I'm so happy to see you again.
You're welcome, Reinhard. Pleasure to see you, man. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and so when the time changes and you come over to Germany again, teaching hopefully,
Yes.
for our listeners, where can they find you exactly on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, I have a website, glenvelez.com, and then I'm often connected with Tamburi Mundi in Germany. So, Murat Kauskin, so that whole arena, I've done a lot of teaching there over the years.
Thank you for sharing the abundance that you are, and thank you, listeners, for going with us all the way. If you like the podcast, visit at powerofrhythm.com/podcast. Leave a comment if you like. Many more very interesting guests coming up. Have a great day and keep on grooving.